Hey guys, welcome back to the channel where you can find all of your basic guides on Total War games. Today we are looking at each individual unit's roles for Khorne. This faction is extremely melee focused with almost no ranged options. Their playstyle will be focused on getting on top of their enemies as quickly as possible and tearing through their ranks. Timestamps can be found in the description if you would like to skip to a particular portion of the video. Here we have the leader of the exiles of Khorne himself, Skarbrand. He's armored, has armor-piercing damage, flaming attacks, and causes terror. He is considered a very strong melee combatant and should be able to duel most lords and heroes on the battlefield. Skarbrand will mostly be fighting alongside your frontline engagements. And now let's look at his abilities. So first up, he has Bellow of Endless Fury, a ranged explosive damage spell. Wrathful Reaper, an augmenting spell but causes rampage. Rage Embodied, more rampage. Encourage, just like any other hero and lord ability. Frenzy, fueled by rage. Slaughter and Carnage. Physical resistance, spell resistance, fear and terror, and lastly Banished, which is an ability all demonic units have. Whenever their leadership is shattered, they take damage over time and eventually get sent back to the Chaos Realm. Next up we have the Exalted Bloodthirster, which is a flying monstrous lord. He is almost exactly like Skarbrand, armored, armor-piercing, flaming attacks, and causing terror. You'll be using him in the same way, fighting alongside your frontline engagements. He also does have pretty similar abilities to Skarbrand: Bloodthirst, Deathbringer, Bellow of Fury, Burning Rage, Encourage, and he can fly. Wrath of Khorne, physical resistance, spell resistance, and Banished. And last up for the lords for Khorne, we have the Herald of Khorne. Armor piercing, anti-infantry, and flaming attacks. He is a melee specialist, so you can probably use him to fight against other lords and heroes, but you can just mainly use him fighting in your frontline engagements. His abilities are Foe Seeker, Deadly Onslaught, Locus of Wrath, Encourage, Hellblade, Revel in Slaughter, Physical Resistance plus 20%, Spell Resistance 25%, causes fear, and he also does have Banish just like any other demonic unit. And now we're moving on to the heroes of Khorne. And so first we have the Blood Reaper. He's a melee specialist. He is almost exactly like the Herald of Khorne, but hero version. Armor-piercing damage, flaming attacks, anti-infantry bonuses. You'll use him to fight against mainly lords and heroes and fighting alongside your frontline engagements. His abilities are Foe Seeker, Deadly Onslaught, Locus of Abjuration, Encourage, Hellblade, Physical Resistance, Spell Resistance, causes fear, and has Banished. And lastly for the heroes, we have the Cultist of Khorne, another melee specialist, armored and shielded. He does have the Frenzy ability. He has decent melee combat stats. You'll be mainly using him to fight in your frontline engagements. He can try to fight some of the melee lords and heroes, but you typically don't want to fight the legendary ones with this guy. His abilities are Foe Seeker, Sword of Anti-Heroes, Gate of Khorne, Encourage, Frenzy, Icon of Endless War, and a 20 or a 15% missile resistance. First up for infantry are the Chaos Warriors of Khorne. These are armored and shielded with the ability Frenzy. These will be your main frontline unit for most of the game, and they do decently well against all tiers of frontline infantry. You will need to keep them away from armor-piercing units. Use them for your frontline engagements to hold everything still while you flank and bolster with your other units. The Bloodletters of Khorne. These are your armor-piercing option for the early and mid-game. They also have a nice anti-infantry bonus. You will mainly use these for bolstering your frontline engagements against armored units, clashing them with other armor-piercing units to prevent them from cutting through your Chaos Warriors, or you can use them to flank the frontline engagements. These are Chaos Warriors, but with halberds. Since these are your tier 2 melee infantry, they are stronger than your basic Chaos Warriors in every way, while also providing anti-large bonuses and charge defense. You will use these on the ends of your formations to guard from any cav or monstrous flanks. You can also send them into the frontline engagements if there are monstrous units wreaking havoc. Chaos Warriors with dual weapons will be your anti-infantry option in the mid-game. These are also armored and have frenzy. They have much less melee defense than your basic Chaos Warriors, so they will be mainly used to bolster your frontline engagements or grinding through low-tier infantry and maybe some lightly armored elite infantry. Exalted Bloodletters of Khorne are your tier 3 greatsword infantry. They have armor-piercing damage, flaming attacks, and anti-infantry bonuses. These guys are quite strong and can be used to bolster your front lines against heavily armored elite units, or you can just use them to fight them head on. You can also use them to whittle down enemy lords and heroes, just be sure to protect them from missile fire. The Gorebeast Chariots of Khorne are your only chariot unit. They are armored, have armor-piercing damage, anti-infantry bonuses, and frenzy. These will be used like any other chariot, hammer and anvil tactics against high-value units fighting in your front lines, or smashing through some isolated units. Blood Crushers of Khorne are a decent cav unit, armored, armor-piercing damage, and anti-infantry bonuses. Their melee attacks are magical, so they can be used against high physical resistance units. They have Hellblade, which gives them weapon damage increases and armor-piercing damage increases when they get more than 60 kills. These can be used to chase down the missile infantry, but it's best to leave that up to your Warhound units and use these guys for your hammer and anvil tactics, preferably against armored infantry. The Skull Crushers of Khorne are your tier 3 shot cav, heavily armored and shielded, with armor-piercing damage and anti-infantry bonuses, as well as the ability Frenzy. These should only be used for psychocharging the backs of your frontline engagements. Chaos Warhounds are very fast, have Vanguard deployment and scaly skin, which provides them with missile resistance. These will be used for disrupting the backline infantry and chasing down units that are routed but not fully broken. Next up we have the Chaos Furies, which are also very fast, have Vanguard deployment, and frenzy with magical attacks, which makes them much stronger than your Chaos Warhounds. These will be used for getting into the backline infantry while your Chaos Warhounds chase down the routed units. Fleshhounds of Khorne are beefed up versions of the Warhounds. They are stronger than them in every way with less models. These will be used in place of your Warhounds and use them for chasing down missile infantry and routing units. Now we're getting into the more scary monstrous infantry. First are your Spawn of Khorne. They are unbreakable, but they will rampage when low on health, decent melee attack and weapon strength but low melee defense. These will be used to bolster your frontline engagements. Make sure they are mixed in with your Chaos Warriors, otherwise they will take a lot of damage in a very short time period. The Minotaurs of Khorne. These are armored, have armor-piercing damage, and anti-infantry bonuses. They do have a new spell called Blood Greed, which gives armor-piercing weapon damage, charge bonus, melee attack, and immunity to psychology. All of these increases intensify with each kill made by the unit, which is awesome. These will be used for bolstering your frontline engagements against heavily armored infantry. The Minotaurs of Khorne with great weapons are your anti-large variants. They have the same ability Blood Greed, and these will be used to bolster your frontline engagements, but only against the ones fighting monstrous units. These guys do some great damage against heavily armored monsters. The Soul Grinder is a terrifying monstrosity. He has access to a missile weapon that fires at the closest enemy. It has pretty high missile strength and armor-piercing damage. He is heavily armored, has armor-piercing, flaming, and magical melee attacks. He is also able to fire his missile weapon while moving. This guy will tear up any frontline engagements you send him into. To generate the most value, his targets should be heavily armored elite units fighting in your frontline engagements. The Bloodthirster is a flying monstrous unit. He has armor-piercing attacks, anti-large bonuses, flaming, and magical attacks. This guy will be your answer to all large units on the battlefield. If you see any monsters in your frontline engagements, you send this guy in to take care of them. The Blood Shrine of Khorne is a magic chariot unit. It's heavily armored, has armor-piercing and anti-infantry damage with flaming and magical attacks. This chariot provides regeneration to all units within range as long as it's in melee combat. It also does provide 5 melee attack and 4 leadership, but this range is much smaller than the regeneration aura. Make sure this thing is constantly fighting alongside your frontline engagements and keep it away from lords, heroes, and anti-large infantry. Lastly, we have the Skullcannon. This war machine is heavily armored, has armor-piercing missile attacks with flaming and magical ammunition as well. The tooltip may say anti-infantry, but that is related to its melee combat stats and not its ranged attacks. This guy will mainly be used for firing into large units or single entities like heroes and lords. Once its ammunition is out, you can send it into melee and it will slowly start to replenish the ammunition and also health, so be sure to send him into your frontline engagements once it runs out of ammo. So that about wraps it up for our Khorne unit roster guide. I hope you found it useful for your Khorne campaigns or helped you decide that Khorne is the faction for you. You can find my suggestions for early and late game army comps in the video description. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you drop a like. Also hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Another note, if you haven't already purchased the game and want to support the channel, you can always use the links below for Warhammer 3, and this ensures a portion of your purchase goes to support the channel.